And I have some ideas about the afternoon. And before I invest more thinking time into them, I would love to get your thoughts. So, essentially, what the afternoon I think needs to look like is it needs to be flexible. And I'm imagining something that I want to give them two choices. So, let me go through what the afternoon looks like. The first thing I want to do with them is show them the syllabus. And a number of our participants will have registered for the U of I credit, and so we'll probably send them to Blackboard to get this because there's a full Blackboard website that supports all this. But what I want to do is set context for the afternoon, and that's based on the assignments section. So there are some assignments. They have to schedule a meeting with me on Zoom, and this Calendly, it's a Google Calendar scheduler. They have some readings to do, so I'm going to direct them to teacher resources, which I'm still thinking about curating a smaller list. I just keep thinking about that conversation with Barb, and a smaller list might be more helpful for them. So whatever that version of that list is, I'll send to here, and then they're essentially going to be designing a lesson, and their lesson has to meet these requirements. This is open for change as well. What I heard from Wanda at U of I is that as long as there's 15 hours worth of work for students to do, teachers to do, I can rearrange this however I need to. So what I envisioned this originally as: identify some standards, think about how we'll see evidence that students are building understanding of this particular target, and then identify the design thinking resources that they're going to use as part of their lesson. And then they can use whatever format they want, but they need to create a lesson, write it down, and then have it ready to send to me during the coaching session, which is another part of this assignment. So they're going to go create a lesson. They're going to try it out with their students. They're going to do a reflection on that, and then they're going to spend time with me kind of going through it. It's just a conversation. Like, hey, how did this go? What are some tweaks we can make? They're going to make some tweaks. They're going to try it again, and then they're going to do another reflection before they come back. So I want to go through that with them in definitely less than 10 minutes. Kind of like, okay, here's where you're headed. So for you to be able to leave the building today, so I'm going to role play this for a second. So if in order for you to leave the building today and feel prepared to start this 5 hours worth of work without me here, you have a couple options. And there's different ways to learn and different styles. Of these two options I'm going to provide for you, I would be the student who would very clearly choose one. And my wife actually is a teacher, and she would be the student that would very clearly choose the other. So let's talk about what those two options are. Your first choice, you have to qualify for. It's essentially, I'm going to turn you loose to go work on some stuff with one or more people that are here in this room. If your group meets these requirements. So you have one or more collaborative partners with you that are from your building. You have a shared context in that building. So you're either teaching the same subject, you share a classroom, you're already teamed up in some capacity, or you're creating a program together. And not all of these things have to be true, but let's say you have at least one of those things that are true. Or maybe there's another shared context that you have. And then you have, I don't know how to do this grammatically correctly, so I think it's silly. I'm going to keep it. Enough, air quotes, influence, air quotes, to implement or push for implementation of your solution. So this option is you're going to basically get to go frame your design challenge using one or the other set of resources. They're both like guides that are designed to help you walk through an entire design thinking process like we did this morning with the wallet challenge, but in your context for a problem you're invested in. And you can have the afternoon to go work on those things, 2.5 hours. We're going to come back and spend the last half hour together as a full group. But this could be something that you could choose to do if you're interested in that. And again, if you meet these requirements. Okay, and we'll have a chance, as you're deciding what you're going to do, to discuss this a little bit further if you have questions. So the other option that you have, you may qualify for all those things we listed on the last page, but going out on your own doesn't feel like something you're quite ready to do yet. If you'd rather spend the afternoon working together. So I have some sort of teacher-led activities where we're going to take design thinking and break it into smaller bits. and work directly on applying it to our current classroom. You'll have more discussions with the large group as opposed to the smaller group. And it's essentially is this sort of one step at a time approach. It also directly impacts your homework. So you're going to have an opportunity to begin working on your homework because these activities are really like structured and organized in such a way that they get you ready to do your homework. So you can stick with us and we'll do those things. Or you can go back and really just say, you know what, I'm ready to start using this tool. I know enough to be dangerous. Let me go. And by the way, if you choose this option, in between as I'm helping the large group with the sort of teacher-led activities while they're working on tasks, I'll be over sitting with you and discussing and coaching. So I'm not abandoning you, but you're taking the lead in that session. So you have the afternoon to make a choice or a choice of what to do with the afternoon. So let's take some time and make those decisions. Okay, so I'm done role playing. I'm really curious what you think about that. I think it's essential that if I'm going to engage them in providing multiple opportunities for their students, I have to model them doing the same thing. It's going to be a challenge to facilitate. I'm going to be very busy moving constantly from group to group and activity to activity. But I think it improves the quality of the experience, particularly if we have people who've had a little bit of design thinking experience, which some of our participants might. Or there's a bunch of people like me sitting in the audience who would not want to go step by step through this. I would want to be turned loose to go play and figure it out. So what follows here are some activities that I've started designing for the group that are choosing option B, that they want to stay with the large group, and we'll work through it. So here's the first activity is I want to think about splitting design thinking up. And the way that we're going to do that is think about the foundation of your particular course. So you are in a traditional context and you're responsible to give credit for a particular subject. So what this is a little sort of hands-on. It's a Google drawing material that they're going to go get in and essentially do this. Actually, I'll show you my slide because my slide has a GIF of this happening. So they're going to get in and make a copy. And what the activity asks them to do is reorganize, change labels of, add, subtract, move the subjects around near their foundations. So for example, I would say with mathematics, it finds its foundation in the design thinking process in the define phase. You could also argue it's in the test phase. I would say engineering finds its foundation in the prototyping phase. So this is the activity. They're going to get in and do some thinking and do it in a hands-on way where they're getting in and physically, manipulating these pieces. And then we're going to come back and have a large group discussion about, well, what is the foundation for your course? If you were able to take design thinking and break it up into discrete steps, which is a little dangerous, but I think we need to do it to honor their context, right? Like if they're in a silo, is it possible to take components of design thinking and bring them into the silo? And it is, I've done it. So we're going to kind of equip them to do that. So the first part of the conversation is, what is your foundation? And then it stretches into a conversation about empathy. So this is the activity that I haven't built yet because I'm not exactly sure how. But in between this DT foundation and identifying the state standards, this discussion about what is your course's foundation is going to naturally lead into how do you bring empathy into your course? Because if you're going to if you're going to separate all the parts of design thinking, the one you have to take with you into your silo is empathy. So we're going to explore what it looks like through an activity to bring empathy into your course. And what's interesting about that is there's actually there are blurred lines between this foundation conversation, how do we bring empathy into our course, and then state standards. Because as soon as you start looking at state standards outside of your context, so I'm going to assume for a minute that we have STEM teachers whose course foundation So I'm going to assume that our teachers, their foundations aren't in empathy. The humanities are going to find their foundations here more than the sciences. The sciences are going to be more here. Obviously, the conversation shifts if I have humanities teachers in the room, but that is totally fine. It's a conversation with them about how do we prototype. And what brings it all together is a conversation about standards. So I want to show them some version of this field trip thing we're doing tomorrow. I'm happy to show them the thing that you've created or my first draft. My real goal here is to get them to read essentially the second page, some sort of prompt. Go build something out of simple found materials, which will end up being your launcher, your scientific instrument. Then, now that you have a scientific instrument, what experiments could you design around that thing? And if that was the task given to students, we as teachers have an opportunity to pursue an incredible amount of standards across content. And as soon as you shift from being a single discipline to being interdisciplinary, the opportunity for empathy is everywhere. And honestly, by taking a step toward empathy, you are taking the possible step toward all of these others. Or another better way to say it is, if you keep the door open to empathy or human stories in your classroom, then design thinking gets to come through the door too. So what this does, this afternoon kind of culminates in revisiting this, which I think I showed you in the other video, is this, where are you? Where do you find yourself? And the assignments in this course are intended to kind of nudge you to the right and up, unless you find yourself here. So I'm curious about your thoughts about that. Yeah, can you share your thoughts? Thanks.